and we have a quorum. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. I just want to make one comment for the benefit of everybody on the call. And this is a theme that came up last week. We do not yet, capital budget, we do not yet know how much money is being transferred into the stabilization fund at this special town meeting. The stabilization fund right now it's sort of teetering right at the $1 million target. And there are structural reasons that I won't bore you with why we tend not to want to see that balance dip at all below $1 million. And so we approved several smaller items last week. And we've got, several items in front of us this week, several of which are more sizable in nature. So I just want everyone to be aware that there's going to be some hesitance, at least on my part tonight, to be voting in favor of, major capital appropriations before we know how much is coming into the fund and how much we actually have to spend. I think the time will be constructive tonight, no matter what, in terms of getting to yes on these, whether they come at special town meeting or come at the annual town meeting. But there is sort of that that actual funding capacity issue as a backdrop. And if there's anyone else on capital budget that'd like to chime in, I welcome it.
I agree.
Okay. So with that as a backdrop, why don't we go ahead and jump in? First item is the electric school bus.
Okay. And I will start this by saying, I don't know if this is a capital budget item, if this is informational. It ties to a lease, not a purchase. And the schools may not have figured out, or it may not have decided yet whether it's going to be incremental or part of their current fleet where they displace a diesel bus. So with all of that uncertainty, let's at least walk through the opportunity. And then at the end, we can talk about what some of your concerns might be or comments, and any questions you might have, at least answer them.
Sure.
So
I can clarify one thing right up front, Tanya. A lease commitment in excess of $10,000 is a capital budget request. So you are in the right place. The existing bus fleet is entirely leased, and it's very much a capital budget process and an appropriation.
okay, then perfect. Glad I'm here and glad I'm talking to you, and thank you for having us. So there has been a process, which we'll talk about, that's been going on for a year to look at a potential demonstration project under which, with help of grants, the town would have the opportunity to try an electric bus under a lease. And our goal was to try to get the lease payments down to the equivalent or less than an existing diesel bus. We have succeeded in that opportunity, and we wanted to talk about what that opportunity looks like. Turns out we had to go through a 30B procurement process. So we did do the procurement process. We received the requisite 2 bids, and this is a recommendation to the Capital Budget Committee on the proposed electric school bus demonstration project. And this is from the Alternative Energy Committee. Whether or not there's a vote to proceed today or at some point in the future, I think will depend perhaps on what the schools want to do, but maybe not. Maybe the discussion today allows you to at least understand this opportunity. So we're going to give an overview, talk about the electric school bus demonstration project and the next steps. But the project offers a chance to test out an electric bus potentially at no incremental cost to a diesel bus. And that's what we were trying to do. And this is important because, as you probably know, electric buses are moving forward. They're receiving $5 billion in funding from the EPA over the next 5 years. That grant money is unlikely to come to a town like Cohasset. There are very impoverished places that are probably going to get that money first, and they're driving buses that are more than 10 years old. So this is a rare opportunity for a town like ours to get some grant money, and it's tied to a demonstration project of looking at vehicle to grid services. So we've spent the last year, in October, we were invited by MASCEC to look at this opportunity. In December, we presented to the school committee, who agreed that the AAC should explore further. spring, we started to socialize this opportunity and meet with school staff about their needs. Are there any roadblocks? What do they need? What are their concerns? We did receive some indicative pricing and what the project would look like from a potential bidder that allowed us to feel comfortable that this was a potential go that could achieve our goals at no incremental cost to the town. We presented, the AEC and the potential bidder presented to the school committee, who agreed to proceed with an RFP. And at that meeting, we answered some of the key questions, which we'll discuss today. And then during the summer, we issued the RFP to interested parties, and 5 interested parties indicated that they would like to receive the RFP to ultimately bid a bus and a company that provides the vehicle to Grid and had already procured the grants. And so now we've completed the review, the evaluation committee completed the review, and we're presenting the recommendation to the relevant committees, including yourself. And we are potentially scheduled to present to the school committee next week. But given the budgeting issues, they might postpone it to November. So the collaborative effort has resulted in our minds, the evaluation committee's minds, in an opportunity that's a no-brainer, because we get to test out an electric school bus and all the benefits that that may have at the same cost as a diesel bus. And normally, just as a note, that reflects basically, as we'll talk about, a 2/3 discount off of what leasing an electric bus would normally cost. So we've had ongoing conversations through this process. We've worked closely with school staff, Susan Owen, superintendent. We've met with the school committee, as we've already talked about. We're meeting with you today. The Cohasset Select Board is aware of this opportunity, and the advisory committee. We've mentioned it in one of our presentations. So I think nearly everyone in the decision-making positions should be familiar with the project. But again, this is now when push comes to shove and the money either is allocated or not allocated. As I've already mentioned, there's $5 billion that the EPA is going to grant to subsidize electric school buses over the next 5 years. That's part of the infrastructure bill. But as we looked into that opportunity, we saw that the initial rounds prioritized disadvantaged communities that actually own their buses, and specifically buses that are more than 10 years old. And how do we compare to impoverished communities? No surprise, we are nowhere near the prioritized towns that have poverty levels above 20%. So the chance of getting some of that money, unless it's part of a demonstration project, is probably pretty low. I can't say we're not going to be able to get any of that federal money. We're going to watch it and try to go after it. But at least for this first round of $1 billion, it would not be coming to a town like Cohasset. So the best chance is to be innovative and look at potential demonstration projects. And that is what this project includes. And this project is basically, as I already said, it's a vehicle to grid demonstration project. And the winning bidder is NLX, who would be able to provide us with the buses and a number of other things, which we'll talk about. And then when those buses are not being used by the town and are sitting at the charging station, NLX can then use that bus to provide services in a way that ensures the town is not at risk of running out of electricity when we need the bus. So it's a unique opportunity. NLX currently has 1,500 e-buses that are leased or managed, so they're familiar with this. They've given us an option to lease or own one electric school bus at the town's choice, and it would be a lease to own. They are priced to be competitive versus existing diesel school buses under the current pricing that the town has, and includes all maintenance and fuel costs plus management of charging times. And a level 2 charger by National Grid would be thrown in for at no cost to the town. The town gets to determine where that charging station would be, and the town or the schools can also determine what the brand of the bus is, what the additional bells and whistles are. Of course, adding things that aren't already included in this. Basic price would be additional, but we have flexibility to get an electric bus that meets our needs. And the hope would be to make a decision so we could get it by fall 2023. There's around a 12-month lead time that may shrink with the money that's coming down the pipe with the EPA, but we would like to get in front of that queue if possible. But obviously, I think the school committee is a key decision maker on whether to proceed. They need to feel comfortable with this, and I think they do. So here's the pricing offer. We asked them for 4 options: a 5-year, a 7-year lease, and a 5-year lease to own, and a 7-year lease to own. You can see what the monthly price would be during the lease period. The annual price is put in there for comparison to what we're currently paying. And then total payments are the total payments over the course of the lease. And what you'll see is it comes nowhere near the cost of an electric bus. So for comparison, the current lease, our understanding is the current lease on the school buses is around $22,000 per year. The fuel price under current diesel prices is around $3,500, and then maintenance comes in at around $1,500. So, all in that $25,000 a year for the 5-year lease, and for the 7-year lease is competitive with what we're paying for the existing diesel buses, possibly even a little bit lower. To buy a diesel bus, it's between 150 to 200,000. An electric bus is around 325,000 to 375,000. I put that in there not because we're looking to buy these buses, but to show you how much of a benefit we're getting from the grants that NLX has procured from the state to do this demonstration project. We basically have a lease for an electric bus that is 2/3 off what the cost would be if we were to lease the electric bus directly at market prices. And as already mentioned, the proposal includes all the cost of the fuel, the electricity, and the O&M and the charging station. And there's a lease to own option. Reasons to do it. I've already mentioned unique opportunity for Cohasset. It slightly lowers our bus lease cost, fuel and O&M savings. Cohasset gets to try electric buses before they're adopted more widely in other schools, or perhaps even mandated by the state. We get the installation of an advanced charging station at no cost. We can act, if we act now, before the rush on the market, and we get a pole position in future electric bus opportunities, which may or may not be worth anything, we don't know. And direct knowledge of operations and experience so the town can decide, do we want to convert the fleet at a point in the future? There are some logistical issues. I think the schools have gotten comfortable around, at least school staff. We had a conversation with school staff. I think they've gotten comfortable around the logistical issues of parking. Parking does remain an issue for the entire fleet, but the town has offered a dedicated parking location at the rec center. They're also concerned about having a separate bus versus their lease for a fleet of buses. They're going to go out to bid soon to try to get buses, diesel buses, coming in line next summer. It does not include drivers, just like the other bus lease does not include drivers and will not include drivers. There is 10+ hours of driver training, and the lease period, depending on what we choose, may diverge from the rest of the fleet. So maybe there are complications at renewal. I would have to imagine it's not that hard to lease a bus for the interim if needed. So key concerns, again, based on the conversation with the schools, not yet with the school committee, seems that they can be overcome. The parent concerns, I think, is obviously one that comes up. Safety is paramount. Batteries may still be suspicious, but the reality is electric school buses have fewer moving parts, no tank of flammable liquid, less tailpipe pollutants, and fewer downtimes. And schools around the country will be adopting electric vehicles given the federal grant money. Parking, as I already mentioned, the town has identified a number of options for the entire fleet. For the interim, so that's not a non-starter for the electric bus, the town has offered the rec center. and a lot of this work was done by Michelle, so she can comment on the status of this. Charging stations, once we're done with the bus, if we don't renew, that charging station stays with the town and it can be used by any vehicle. And then scheduling, schools have the priority on the use of the bus and determines when the batteries get charged and how and when it can do vehicle to grid operations. So I think the primary issue of parking keeps getting raised. There's a lot of effort going on to try to find a solution, but I think that this should not be a part of that. That this, if it needs to park elsewhere, can. NLX proposed the Lion C bus as part of the NLX bid, but we do not have to go with that brand if we'd prefer to go with another brand. And again, whatever bells and whistles are wanted could be done. And so ideally, we'd have a timely decision. I'd appreciate some information on how you see the process of approval working out. Is it special town meeting to be able to agree to go forward with the award? Do we have to make sure it's included in the budget? On this, as I mentioned at the very beginning, it's unclear if the schools look at this as an additional bus. That would be $25,000 a year in addition to the current fleet, or if it would displace one of the buses that they're going out for bid. That's obviously a decision for the schools and the school committee to make. And I don't even know if that makes a difference, given that we're talking about an annual lease that's more than $10,000 a year. So key thing is there is a timing issue just to make sure we can get the grant money, and most importantly, to make sure that we get our order in front of the queue that is going to get backlogged as soon as the EPA starts awarding $1 billion in grants. But again, the key goal would be to use this opportunity at no incremental cost to gather information, make an informed fleet decision going forward, and just getting a feel for this new technology that's not so new, but that is going to start to be very widely adopted throughout the country. That's the presentation. Any questions, concerns, thoughts?
I have a few, but I don't necessarily need to lead off. Does anyone from Capital want to lead off with questions?
Well, Brian, I was hoping to just get a little background again on the current leases, because I know that they've been extended. So, Tanya, do you know how many buses we have and what kind of extensions they're on and when they're coming up?
Yes. So, Michelle, you probably have these numbers at your fingertips. I think the current lease is 7 buses. And they are thinking of going out to bid for 8 because they feel like they need an extra one for when a bus may run out of service. I understand the town also has 2 old buses that they have available, and those are buses that they run as an emergency backup. And the lease was extended a year. It would be expiring, I believe, in June of 2023. And my understanding is the schools are going out to bid for leases for new diesel buses imminently for delivery in the summer of 2023.
Okay.
I've got several questions. Tanya, who's on the evaluation committee?
So Michelle managed the procurement process. I reviewed the proposals. The proposals were also sent to Susan, and it was Susan Owen.
Okay.
It was also fairly clear that both bidders were well qualified from an experience point of view. So it definitely came down to price. And the other bidder did not have grants to offset the cost. And so the lease came in directly from the bus at a market price for an electric bus.
What does vehicle to grid mean?
Vehicle to grid means that the bus when it is charging could be used to offset demand on the grid. So instead of charging, if it's a peak period and the ISO New England needs the bus to, or needs an offset against the peak load, the bus can be used to stop charging, for example. So it can stop charging. And then there's potentially ancillary services tied to helping with management on the grid. Right now, I'll be honest with you, even though that is the demonstration project, there is not a existing program in place at ISO New England to test that. So there's sort of a skating towards the puck type of thing with respect to the grant money. The grant money was awarded and we would be able to take advantage of that grant money, whether or not there's a vehicle to grid operation, which would be dependent upon the ISO New England, which operates the grid.
Yeah,
But-
I'm still not clear on what you mean. You said the bus when charging can be used for what?
So when it's charging, it can be turned off. So it's like a conservation measure, a negawatt, if you would. So the same way when California was running out of power, they put out a text. They asked people to shut off their lights, turn off their air conditioners. And as a result, 2,000 megawatts of load immediately dropped.
But the buses weren't charging. So if you
Well,
had, I don't want
yeah.
to get too deep into the weeds here, but I'm still not clear on an advantage, what you mean by vehicle to grid and how that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Okay, so if the bus was charging, that would be pulling on load, electrical load.
Yes, but you're also
And if-
charging up the bus for use.
Correct, but there are a lot of hours during which you could charge the bus. And you'd want to make sure as part of the, and NLX has already said this, like, for example, if it's a weekend and the call comes out on a Saturday, it's very safe to stop charging the bus on a Saturday, knowing you have the Sunday where you can finish charging.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the duration of the lease is still unknown, but it would be, I guess, comparable.
So the duration of the lease could be a 5-year or 7-year was what
Okay.
they bid. And somebody
Are-
else makes
are
that
our-
decision.
Michelle, are our buses on a 5-year? Is memory served?
I believe our buses are on a 3-year lease at the current time with the option to renew with select board or school committee approval for an additional 2 years, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. And then, Tanya, do you have any idea what the lifespan is on the electric bus with the fewer components? Would it last longer? Is salt an issue?
So
corrosion?
I believe that the buses are warranted for 10 years,
Okay.
and that includes the battery.
I have a few more questions, Brian, but if you want to go ahead, go ahead.
No, keep going.
Hold on, just making some notes here. All right, so what happens if the demo project is successful? Without federal funding, how much money will the town need to proceed further?
So that is unknown. And the reason why that's unknown is we do not know how $5 billion in federal funding is going to push the electric buses down the cost curve. So we don't know at the end of 5 years what an electric bus is going to cost. Right now, yeah, I don't think the town would pay the incremental cost for an electric bus, even though the Boston school system did. So the Boston school system bought 10 school buses at $310,000 a bus. This town is obviously different than the Boston school system.
Mhm.
So we wouldn't know what the cost is going to be. I would believe it's going to be less than the $325,000 that it currently is, or on a real basis. Because I do expect that there's going to be some significant cost curve savings over the next 5 years, and we would get the benefit of that, but I don't know if it's going to be low enough that they're on par with diesel. And I
Okay.
don't know what kind of grants would be available at the end of that 5-year or 7-year period.
Tanya, just for a observation point, did they give you what the lease pricing would be at the full cost of an electric bus? If we were to
We,
move forward?
no. This bidder did not give us, and the other bidder did not give us what the lease price would be in 5 years or 7 years. We did not receive that information as part of the bids.
And then one final comment that really has nothing to do with electric buses, but I want to just put it on the table for you, Michelle, and the rest of our committee. On the whole parking question, I feel like we are overlooking one, to me, obvious place to park all our buses, and that is in the current student parking. And if we are providing buses to the entire town at considerable expense, then I feel that student parking is certainly not a right. It's definitely a privilege. And those student parking spaces could be sacrificed in order to save the town money on space rental and so on. So that's a soapbox that I'll insert here. And then Brian, you're up.
Well, I was going to ask the question as to how long the batteries last, but I think you hit this already, Tanya. If I heard correctly, there's a 10-year warranty, including the battery. And I guess, I guess we have to think about whether or not we actually want to own these buses at the, at the end of this, lease. I don't think we have much interest in owning diesel buses at the end of 5 or 7 years because they're warranted for 3. But if the warranty is good for 10, then perhaps we need to think about it. It obviously is an incremental annual commitment, as you can see here in that middle column, annual price.
It is, right? And I think that this is a decision to be made by people who've done a lot of thinking about whether or not we should lease our own buses. We do, if you look
basically-
at this, yep.
I'm just saying, looking at the numbers, you're basically, if I compare the first row to the third row, the right-hand column, right? Total payments, 5-year lease versus 5-year lease to own. You're basically spending an extra $100,000 to take ownership of a 5-year-old bus.
Right, and for the 7-year, you're paying around 50,000 grand
For the 7-year,
to own a 7-year-old bus.
Mhm.
And then you can see how it converges to the 10-year, right?
yeah,
And the warranty. And also keep in mind that that pricing reflects around $100,000 in grant money subsidizing what an electric bus would cost outright, which is that 325 to 375.
right. So really the subsidy is mostly flowing through the annual lease price
Mhm.
in the pure lease case. And then it's just a question of whether or not you want to throw the incremental money for what's left of the bus at the end of year 5 or 7. But you have to make that decision largely up front.
Yeah, there's 2 things, Brian, that's subsidizing it. One
Yeah.
is NLX is taking the risk about what the value of that bus would be at the end of 5 years and at the end of
Right.
7 years. And the second is the subsidy tied to the capital cost. And that's how we're able to get the cost. We made it very clear to them that it would be very hard to come in and support their initial price as part of the indicative discussions was higher than this.
Right.
And we just said, it's going to be very hard to sell this to the town. You've got to be on par with diesel. They worked really hard. And I will say NLX.
To get it in. Yeah, I see that.
And they did this because they want to do this project. They
Right.
have the grants lined up. We're a perfect town for them to do this project. And they've been a great partner. They also do other things in the energy space, which could be
Yeah.
helpful as well.
So, I mean, my instinct is that, it may or may not be an okay deal to buy a 5 or 7-year-old bus for either 100 or 50 grand at that point in time. It's kind of hard to say at this point without any experience with these buses. I mean, we may get 3 years into this and wish we hadn't done it at all.
We might, and frankly, again, the state is moving to decarbonization by 2040, right?
Right.
So I can, as long as that continues as a policy goal, there will come a point where electric
Where we're going to be doing
buses
this.
are
Yeah.
mandated.
Yeah.
So to
Makes
get
sense.
that information now and make a decision about do we do it earlier or later, I think would be very valuable.
Okay. Did you, look, it all makes sense given it's a wash and we learn something in the process, particularly if we're not adding an incremental bus and that this isn't just sort of a, an experiment funded in an extra line item that wouldn't have otherwise occurred. So that makes sense. But in terms of the bus design, it looked to me as though the Lion C was a slope nose bus, not a flat nose bus. Yeah, that. And I know right now we run a fleet of what I'll call flat nose buses. There's no hood fundamentally.
Oh, yeah.
And I think there is some operational preference that the drivers in the school have had for that type of bus. I think part of it is visibility, which is less of an issue now that they've really got these sloped hoods. You can see kids in front of the bumper now better. But part of it, I think, was turning radius. My recollection when we bid for buses was that the flat nose buses were more expensive than the slope nose buses. I apologize if I'm using the wrong terms, but it would be helpful, Tanya, if you could find out if doing a sort of a flat nose bus would come in at the same price.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's two things. One is, I understand Susan Owen is going to be going out to bid for the leases imminently.
Yeah.
So we'll know what the new lease price is. It may
Yeah.
not be $22,000 with
It's not
inflation.
going to be, it'll be higher. So there is a benefit to the fact that, this lease price is competing against a 4-year-old diesel lease.
Correct. And I think we should just think about, do we go back to NLX and ask about the flat
Yeah.
nose when then somebody might say, well, we also want seatbelts and we want charging stations and we want 360 cameras. I don't know. I mean, I can ask them and they can go and ask and we can start to get all sorts of bells and whistles or changes to the bus. But the question is,
Yeah.
do we do it on a one-off basis or do we just get a comprehensive list once we know there's interest?
I don't know. I don't know if I have an answer. I don't know if anyone else on the committee feels strong. I mean,
I mean, it doesn't, I can just go back to NLX and say, can you find out what the incremental cost would be for a flat nose bus?
or ask if there is an incremental cost. I mean, there may not be
Right.
with an electric bus. There just may not be. I mean, you see a lot more of them. You see a lot more flat noses around now than you did 10 years ago.
Right.
I think a lot of other districts have caught on.
Yep.
And, given this is electric, you don't really need, the space under the nose for a big diesel engine anymore because there isn't, right?
I'm looking at their website. They definitely have the flat nose buses on their website, so they must offer it.
Okay.
Right. And the picture in your presentation earlier was one. So it would be helpful. What I don't want to do, and there's a bit of a chicken and an egg here, but what I absolutely don't want to do is get completely, committed to NLX and then find out that the bus that they're providing is something that our fleet doesn't want to operate.
Totally agree. And
So we
that's
should-
where, but again, the town can choose whatever
Right.
changes they want. They can choose
Okay.
a different brand. So we can design it. It's just a question of cost. And then
Okay.
we'll have the comps associated with the bid going out to bid for the lease that
Did you-
allows us to compare.
Did you by chance give NLX the spec on the buses that we run right now?
We gave some information. I don't know if it was the exact spec.
Okay.
We didn't give exact specifications.
Okay.
I have a small administrative point here on our agenda. What I see here is a vote for a 3-year lease when it's 5-year, correct?
Yes, that would be my mistake.
Okay.
So my alternative energy committee meeting has already been started. But I
Okay.
don't think it's been called to order. So if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise,
The only question I would have is how would you like to proceed? Do we need an answer from the school as to whether or not they want to do this? Is that the logical next step?
so I don't know, right? This is sort of the normal, you got to go talk to everybody in the town to make something happen type of approach. And then
Yep.
there's sort of an order. And I
Yep.
think we'd like to know whether or not the capital budget committee is interested in this. I don't know if that's a piece of information that's going to determine their vote. But, if they're thinking of using,
I think we can probably give you some indicative feedback right now. I mean, I'm happy to pull, the committee. I'm not sure we're in a position to vote this, but we can certainly pull the committee and give you feedback, and I'm happy to lead off.
Mhm.
Given that the price is basically in line with the diesel bus, given it's green and given we probably learn a lot about operating an electric school bus, which is a smart thing to do, given we may be forced to run an entire fleet of them at some point in the not too distant future, it seems pretty straightforward to me. But I certainly want to hear from Michael and Susan.
I agree.
Oh, I agree too. I think it's a great opportunity to do all those things. And since the bus leases are coming up anyway, I need to go back out to bid. The timing is actually very good.
Michelle,
Okay.
how much time do we have to figure this out to get it on the warrant? About a week?
So you have a couple of weeks. Everything has to be wrapped up and presented to the select board in a nice bow by the first week in November, because then it has to go to print. But like Michael indicated last week, there's nothing to say that you don't have to have a vote in the warrant and you can vote on town meeting floor. So
Right.
you always have that option.
Okay.
So thank you, Tanya. This is another
Yeah.
great idea coming out of your committee and a lot of hard work. I think a lot on your shoulders.
Right.
So,
well,
I
thank
really-
you.
really
And
want to-
a very thorough presentation. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Susan.
Yeah.
I'm
Thanks,
very
Sonia.
excited.
Keep it
about this
going.
opportunity. Thank you very much for your support. Appreciate it.
Got it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Over to the chief.
Here we are. Getty. So this is a little bit easier than school buses. I think it's pretty straightforward. I sent a link out to some members of the committee to the Capitol mailbox tonight.
Okay.
You caught that, but it talks about the reason why we both audio and visually record interviews and interrogations. So we're looking for support for a purchase of $15,050 recording system for the detectives and officers to use in the interview in the squad room where we conduct interviews. The system that we currently use, we've sort of just rigged something together and it's been working. It was working. But what happens is we get to string videos together, and that's become problematic in editing. These videos are not supposed to be edited.
Right.
So we string it together into one file. And Rich Kinship is here. He can talk about that. He takes care of that process. But depending on the length of the interview, these interviews can be 2 or 3 hours at some point. And there's multiple files that have to be stitched together, and the DA has flagged that as problematic.
Yeah.
So that's the long and short of it. There is a grant out there that I think we can do enough wordsmithing where we may be able to purchase or reimburse, purchase the system with the grant. Unfortunately, the grant is not announced till after a special town meeting. So if we were successful in the grant, we'd obviously return the money to the proper account.
Okay. Chief, do you know the name of the grant offhand, just so we could perhaps
I do.
in any motion that's made?
Sure. It is it's a mouthful. It's called the STOP grant, and it's the fiscal 22 Violence Against Women Act Services Training Officers Prosecutors Formula Grant. The STOP grant. state stop grant.
The state stop grant. Okay. STOP.
Yes.
Okay. I think that should serve. So we heard this in detail last week, and it wasn't on the agenda, so we couldn't vote it. Does anyone, thank you for just refreshing our memories on this. Does anyone have any further questions on this?
No further question, but again, on the agenda, I'd like to just make a change here that this is, my understanding, this is a video system for interviews and interrogations and not surveillance.
Oh, yeah, it's not.
Because that threw me off. I thought this was a new request.
No, this is.
Yeah, so I think it's a good thing and we should move ahead.
Okay, and I like your choice of wording, Michael, for the motion better than perhaps surveillance cameras. Susan, any questions from you?
No, I think we covered it pretty well in this article. Thank you.
Okay, happy to entertain a motion if anyone would so move.
A second.
No, I can't move. Someone needs to move the motion.
Susan, you got to make the motion tonight.
I'm reading the website about it. Okay, so you want me to make the motion? I don't have the dollar amount.
All right.
I don't have the
I'll go.
Okay.
All right. I move capital budget committee recommend the purchase of a video recording system for interviews and interrogations, $15,050. Period.
Do you want to mention the stop grant, Michael?
In a way, I don't, because I don't want to like put the chief in a bad position. I don't know.
We've generally required, I mean, so last week we had a few of these and we simply required that they apply, not necessarily that they succeed. Is it your?
So let me add on to the last period and just say, if grants become available for the purchase, then Cohasset Police Department will apply the grant award back. I'm not sure how we phrase. Will reimburse the town for the outlay.
How about, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah, of course.
Simpler that, the police department will apply for grants. We'll apply for grants, or we'll apply for the state stop grant.
Okay.
Well, if I could, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in, it's possible that we wouldn't, I'm not going to order this piece of equipment until we hear the disposition on the grant, which is like December 15th. So, the money might just never be tapped, the capital money.
Understood, but I think our commitment, Bill, with this appropriation is that you have the funding to buy the system. We just want it to be clear to everybody that to the extent there's a grant out there, we will in fact go through the trouble of applying for it. That's
Gotcha.
what it comes down to. And if we get it, great. If we don't, you still get your system.
Maybe that's
You want the system regardless of whether or not you're awarded the grant. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we have to have it. Yeah.
Okay, all right.
okay. So I just after the first sentence, put the police department will apply for the state stop formula grant program.
Great.
Is that correct? I think that's what it's called.
Chief, are you comfortable with that? You're confident that you did?
Oh yeah, we're actively doing an application right now.
Okay, so you're going to apply for it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So can we read the motion back quickly?
Capital budget recommends the purchase of a video recording system for interviews and interrogations for $15,050. The police department will apply for the state STOP formula grant program.
Perfect. All right. So someone needs to move it. Someone needs a second.
All right, I'll let Susan move it and I'll second it.
Susan?
Okay. I would like to move,
Well, that's what we just did.
Okay,
Just
I'd like to move, we got it. You moved the motion.
Yeah,
Michael, you want a second?
I'm seconding. Yep.
Okay, roll call vote. I'll lead off. Brian Host, aye. Michael Dick?
Michael Dick, aye.
Susan Franklin?
aye.
Great. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good luck with the grant, but you get your system either way.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
And it, just a side note, it's obscenely priced, but that's
It's
I can't
Well.
understand it, but welcome to government. Thanks, guys.
got to be litigation ready, so I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is the school vestibule.
That's me. And we don't have any new news to report on this because we did reach out to 3 designers. We're hoping to get all 3 in the school by early next week to be able to give us that cost on a study and bring it to you next week if we can schedule a meeting then.
Okay,
So we have
Let's-
two people extremely interested in the project.
okay. Is one of them the folks that did the school study for us?
One is, yep, them, and the
Okay.
other one is someone who's local.
Okay, super. Okay, so let's wait until we have information before we spend more time talking about that.
Okay.
And with that, let's move on to the electrical vehicle lease.
That's me too. So as you know, we received a grant 3 years ago to lease these Nissan Leaf vehicles. It essentially only cost the town at the time, I believe, $3,500 to acquire all 3 vehicles for the term of 3 years. Because of supply chain and really no new technology to this specific vehicle, we're asking that we purchase these three vehicles and add them to our fleet. The amount is $42,000 approximately to acquire all 3, and our lease is up December 21st.
Any idea what the book value on each of these cars is?
So they told us if we were to sell them back, if we were to hand them back in, they would sell them off the lot for approximately $25,000, $30,000 a piece.
And we're paying 14.
Yes.
Okay. And how often, I know these were free to us the past several years. What is the actual usage on these?
So because it's only local travel, they do not have high mileage. The mileage is under $20,000 per vehicle. But I can tell you one of the vehicles is used daily by Elder Affairs. They use it for appointments for people who can't get into the van because the car is easily accessible for some people. We have one that has strictly become a facilities vehicle. One of the facilities techs use that solely to buzz around town and to fix small projects. And the third one is used for our inspections team. So we have Board of Health, we have the Assessors Department, and we have the Building Department all sharing that one vehicle. And we sign it out on a daily basis, and it's being used all day long.
So it sounds like all 3 vehicles are being used every day almost.
They are. The mileage is not indicative of it because it's just local travel.
It's
but
local, right?
Yeah,
Okay, but the use is high.
yes.
Okay, that's it for my questions. Michael, Susan?
I just wanted to ask how has been maintaining them? Has it been an easy thing to do?
So easy. So really all we've had to do is replace windshield wipers, maybe a couple tires here and there, probably because of our own fault, and just inspection stickers. We've had no problems. We work with Coastal Nissan. They're wonderful. They inspect them for us. They do anything we need.
And there's been really no maintenance costs with these vehicles, and we don't foresee any.
That's great.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Do you feel that our current motor pool, including these 3 vehicles, will cover us for the next 1 to 3 years?
Are you saying, will we need to add additional vehicles to our pool?
Yeah,
I think, in all honesty, I think we are going to have to add an additional vehicle for facilities. They're still short. It's great right now for the tech that we have in place to buzz around an electric vehicle. But once the facilities team takes on more responsibilities, they're going to need more equipment, and they're also going to need maybe even to add additional staff, which will require additional vehicle.
okay, fair enough.
So just a comment on that, Michael, keep in mind in the annual town meeting budget process that we went through last spring, Nick initially came forward with a request, I think, for 1, maybe 2 F-150 Lightnings, but they were not available due to supply chain and lack of inventory. And then he toyed with the idea of getting gas or diesel, but recognizing that vehicle was not the one that he wanted going forward, and that it was probably going to be in our fleet for 7 or 10 years, he actually withdrew the requests. So that's why they're making do with things like one of these little electric vehicles. And Michelle, refresh my memory, but I think we might have moved that police SUV over there temporarily as well. Did we not? One of the retired police SUVs?
We did.
Okay. So
How's that working?
It's working well now because they still have that void, like Brian said, of that 1 vehicle. So it's working well. It is shared with emergency management. So in the event of some type of disaster, emergency management will have access to that vehicle. So it's shared between departments.
it's also an old vehicle, Mike. So this is something that's
But if there's life in it and we're using it, that's really where I'm going with this.
yeah.
Okay. One question for you, Brian, and that goes to your opening statement, and that is, we don't know how much money will be transferred into the stabilization fund. And I wonder if we should set a limit to how much we're willing to recommend this week or next week until we know how much we're going to get. So 42,000 plus 15,000, we're still well under 100,000. I think we can, certainly approve this request, and we've already got the chief's request. But I worry about these next several coming up, and whether that's prudent or not. So
Right. Refresh my memory. What did we approve last week?
We approved the generator, the public safety generator at 70K.
Yeah.
And we approved the radios for the police. That was,
I think it was 15-ish.
12,007. 12,008, basically.
so 81, 120, about 140,000.
So we're already over 100, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Now, Michelle, maybe you can tell us.
139.
Mhm. Maybe you can tell us what the town manager's office is thinking in terms of a request to move money to a capital stabilization.
So we had a meeting with Jennifer, the new finance director. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you know what? I don't even want to say it because I don't even know for sure. I just don't want to misquote what she said. But I think there's going to be a substantial dump into the stabilization fund.
Okay, so Brian, I don't know if we should make this contingent on X number of dollars being moved in.
I don't want to overcomplicate this. I mean, it sounds like we've got, a couple more weeks. I think we all know where we stand on this. I'm happy to pull it informally, but my instinct is we do this provided that we're comfortable with our financial position. I don't know how you and Susan feel.
Well, I'm not comfortable with our financial position unless there's money coming in.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. But so my thinking is maybe we just hold the vote on this until we know our financial position. If we have comfort on our financial position, then we put it through. And if we don't, we don't. I mean, thoughts?
My inclination is to vote this tonight so that it's one less thing on our docket. One less thing, if we have members do show up for subsequent meetings, we don't have to go through a whole new hearing again.
Okay. Then I'd suggest that we just vote it through. I mean, I don't want to make it wildly contingent on strange things happening. It just it's a weird motion.
Okay. All right, then I will move that Capital Budget Committee recommend the purchase of our three Nissan electric vehicles at the end of their lease on the 21st of December, 2022 for a total of $42,000.
Susan?
Just writing it out. Okay, the three electric vehicles currently on lease expiring December 2022 for $42,000. Okay.
21st of December. End of lease 21st of December.
Okay,
And that's three Nissan electric vehicles.
got that.
Susan, would you like to second?
Second,
All right. Roll call vote. Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Susan Franklin,
Susan Franklin, aye.
Brian Host, aye.
You're welcome. I think this is nicely managed, very nicely managed.
Okay, so next up is our library request.
So with the library request, I do just want to make a note that that $125,000 ask is not coming from capital budget. However, that is the ask that will be before CPC, but because this is capital in nature,
Yep.
Carolyn is here to present the project. I'm also, Brian, going to make you host of this meeting in case I lose connection because I just have to move locations. You don't have to worry about it. Everything's all set.
I hope that's true because I have no idea how to run this meeting technologically, none whatsoever. We may be in violation for not adjourning the meeting if things go terribly wrong, but
You'll be fine. I'm going to hop right back on if I lose
okay,
connection.
please do. All right, Carolyn, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Really well, thanks.
So just to repeat, this is being put in front of you all because we would like to ask CPC for funds from their outdoor space bucket to help with this project. Having an outdoor programming space has been something that the library has had in their long-term plan since we moved into the old Osgood School in 2003. We've talked to you about it in the past. During COVID, when the town emergency planning folks got all those tents, we started doing some outdoor programming in the back, and the library users loved it. They were really happy. We've gotten lots of positive feedback. And so we would like to move forward now with a more permanent structure. It's, the tent is not particularly accessible. It's, prone to weather problems with mud and that sort of thing. So we would like to move forward on this project. We worked with a local landscape architect who was phenomenal and has been donating his services. The first plan that he showed us, he absolutely nailed. He gave us 6 options. We went with the first one, and it was, with some tweaks, but it's perfect. What we're envisioning is a patio space with a little amphitheater and performance space at the bottom. If you are standing in front of the building, it would be on the right-hand side of the building along the Sawyer Street wall there. It would be accessed both from inside of the library with a flat threshold accessible, and with the handicap ramp, and also stairs directly down to the parking lot. And this will also help with something you've heard from us about before, which is access to the back parking lot.
Yep.
The patio space will hold approximately 90 chairs. We plan to have picnic, sort of tables and chairs out there that can be used regularly for library patrons to read, or for anybody else for that matter. There will be a sitting wall that can be used for performance uses or just sitting. And then performance, for smaller events, we could do it just on the patio. There will be just a concrete slab that will be a performance space down by the parking lot in the corner where the handicap ramp comes in, where the sidewalk comes in. And then 2 walls, kind of half walls that can be built into the hill for sitting, that will be, where kids can sit on the grass and adults can sit on the walls behind them watching the performances. The location of this is perfect to help move forward that campus vision that was discussed when Elder Affairs went in across the street. The idea would be that this would be used by not just the library, but the recreation department, Elder Affairs, any other programming that the town might need to use. And it can also just be, public space that people can come and use. The space will be appropriate for anything from small book groups to, large children's performances. As far as the cost of the entire project, the designer has indicated that he thinks it would be, including some of the shade trees and things that we would like to also be able to use with it. The total project amount is probably in the 350 to 375 range. And so our intent is to try and pay for it with a combination of private fundraising, some state aid funds that we have accumulated over the years, and then hopefully get CPC to put us over the edge. So the 125 was a third of the cost, and we figured we would try and cover 2/3 ourselves. We have started fundraising planning. We have not started the marketing of the idea and trying to get cash in. So that's where we are. And I think I covered pretty much anything, but I'm happy to answer any questions or provide more information as needed.
So first of all, it's phenomenal that you found a local designer that was excited about this and excited about the town and was willing to contribute their services pro bono. That's just really, the town never ceases to amaze in terms of who's willing to step up and help sort things out and provide their special talents. So that's fantastic. In terms of the process of actually hiring a contractor and getting this built, I assume this would have to go out to a public RFP, or is there somebody that is chomping at the bit to do this? I mean, how does this actually get done in terms of signing a contractor and getting to a final price?
That's probably a question better directed to Michelle, but
Okay.
I too would assume that it will have to go out for an RFQ, RFP, whatever.
Okay.
Michelle?
Yes. Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So yes, it will have to go out to bid.
We do have the design, which is great. So that's half the battle. We put the design out to bid. We take contractors based on qualifications, not based on lowest bidder, to make sure we get the product that we're really looking for, and a qualified vendor.
Okay. I don't have any further questions. Michael, Susan?
Only question I have is, why is this coming to special town meeting versus the annual town meeting?
Just with the hope that we could actually do the project next summer and have it usable.
Okay, thank you.
Just a timing thing.
Okay.
Susan, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I thought the email that we read earlier sort of showed how the funding of it all was going to work out. And again, I think it's a very valuable project for the town. I think it's would universally serve large groups of people, and these are the things that I think the townspeople really look for, these types of projects getting funded.
All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Sure. I move that Capital Budget Committee recommend the expenditure of $125,000 in CPC funding for the Paul Pratt Library outdoor programming space.
We're calling, we named it today in a fundraising meeting, the pavilion at the library.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we could call it the pavilion at the library in the minutes if you want.
Okay. So let's
Yeah.
do that. Okay, so strike out Paul Pratt Library and put in pavilion at the library. I don't see anything else we really need to do. I just want to make sure that we spec that it was CPC funds.
So, Brian and Michael, do we recommend the expenditure, or are we just supporting the project?
How's that handled, Brian, when it's CPC funding?
I'm not sure we differentiate. I mean, we recommend a project.
Yeah.
And we recommend a funding source. In this case, the funding source is not capital budget, it's CPC.
Right.
And the two are hand in hand. You don't get one without the other.
So do you want me to read that again? Or you got it?
I move that capital budget recommend the expenditure of, did you say $100,000?
125.
125.
I thought it was 125. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, 125.
In CPC funding for the pavilion at the library.
Do we want to put anything more like outdoor programming space or with amphitheater? Or
You could say
just-
the amphitheater known as the pavilion at the library. I mean, just so people know what it is, but.
Okay, so
Or the outdoor amphitheater. How about that? The outdoor amphitheater known as the pavilion at the library.
okay, Susan, do you have those corrections?
Yep.
All right, good.
Okay, would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Second? Anyone?
I'll second. If Susan moved, I'll second.
Great. Roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Aye.
Michael Dick,
Mike Dick, aye.
Brian Host, aye.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks so
Carol.
much, Carolyn.
Thank you guys very much.
Great
Nice.
work. The
Carolyn.
design looks really beautiful. It's exciting.
Thanks. We're really excited about it. So
Good luck
thank
with
you.
it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Next up is the water department request.
So I can speak to that, if you can hear me.
Sure.
So we bid the Beechwood water main project. It came in $100,000 over the allocated amount that they asked for at annual town meeting. So they're asking for the difference so they can proceed with the project in the spring. They're going to take it from their retained earnings. So once again, this is not coming from the capital stabilization fund. It's a mechanism to move it from retained earnings to that line item.
Okay. And I know I asked this question of the water department, but I'm suffering a senior moment. But does anyone know the retained earnings? I just remember it was not an issue.
Yeah, it's over 3 million if I remember correctly.
Retained earnings.
I think so, if I'm not mistaken.
Michael, you don't happen to
Are you
remember,
there?
do you?
I'm looking through my notes.
I sadly, I remember asking the question quite specifically and being quite comforted by the answer. I just,
Just looking at some notes here, I think we've approved this 3-0. In the meeting of September 16th. I'm sorry, that's the Water Commission.
the water commission.
Water, yeah, I'm sorry, my bad. I'm not seeing retained earnings. Sorry.
Mm. Yeah, I'm going through some old files from the last fiscal period, and I'm not seeing that either.
And do you have the street numbers from where to where on Beechwood?
I don't have that in front of me,
Okay.
but I'm still looking for the retained earning number.
I'm going to put you on mute for a moment as well, see if I can't find it. Just bear with me. Yeah, I found my notes from that water department meeting. I don't seem to have written it down. All right, we'll just think about this for a second. We can either defer this until the next meeting when we talk about the vestibule, the Osgood vestibule. Or we can think about how we do this today. I mean, I'm comfortable they have the capacity because they're not forging forward on the GAC system, which was, $3.5 million worth of debt capacity, right? But debt capacity is not retained earnings. So to just say, okay, we're going to pull 100,000 out of retained earnings, you have to be confident it's there. I mean, I'm confident it's there. I just don't know what the number is. And so it feels a little odd to approve this. Michael, Susan, what are your thoughts?
I'm inclined to agree with you, Brian, just in terms of a best practice.
I'd rather know the number than wing
Yeah,
it. It just doesn't seem right to me.
right. Not for 100,000. I am personally, I feel confident that there's well enough money for them to do it, otherwise they wouldn't. And in looking at those notes I took at the Water Commission meeting, their motion was to move 100,000 from retained earnings into their maintenance fund.
Right.
I don't think they would have done that without knowing that there was enough of a
Without
balance.
knowing there was retained earnings there to do it.
Yeah,
I concur. I mean, you can either proceed on that logic, or we can just get the number and vote it next week. What would you,
I'm more inclined to want the number before voting.
sorry, you'd rather get the number?
Yeah,
Okay,
agree.
let's
I
just
agree.
do that. I think we're
Yeah.
all in violent agreement that this is going to pass. And even if the retained earnings aren't available, then, you know, we've got debt capacity and we'll authorize debt funding, but this is the right way to do it, is that retained earnings.
Okay, I'll get you that number in the morning.
Done.
okay.
Super.
So
Let's put
it's-
that on the
it's not
agenda for
only-
next week along with the vestibule and.
hold on, please. On, we want to know what the current retained earnings are and any spending plans for the current balance.
Fair enough. I will get that in the morning.
Right.
Super. Okay, and discussion of all last items, discussion of all capital budget requests. I'm not sure what that is.
That was a catch-all in case we forgot something that
Okay.
someone needed to discuss tonight, so I think we're in pretty good shape. The only thing that may come before you next week, with the vestibule and the Beechwood water main, is talk about potential playgrounds, fields, and courts. We're wrapping up discussions with that, with the recreation department, because they are capital in nature. We will ask you to hear them. We're unclear on the funding source at this time, but we'll have more information next week. I believe this is also part of that long-term financial planning group, but we're going to try to move something forward. I believe it's special to get it done in the spring.
When you say something, are you talking about a field? Or are you talking about several fields? Or what are we talking about? What?
We're talking about the potential of a playground or a field or a phase of a field. We don't know the appetite for an entire field, so maybe if we phase a project, that would be more palatable for many people.
Okay, I'll just make an observation. It sounds as though no one knows exactly what they want to do, but there seems to be a feeling that we need to do something,
Exactly.
which is usually a recipe for disaster.
So we have prioritized what we believe the needs are without speaking to the Recreation Commission and Open Space. I don't feel comfortable sharing anything until we get a blessing from them, because it really is under their purview. And we are meeting, I believe, Monday or Wednesday of next week.
Okay.
Michelle, I had thought that the tennis courts were the next thing in line for recreation. Did that change?
Nope, so the tennis courts are still on the table.
Okay.
Okay, and just an aside, you're aware that the senior center is putting in several pickleball courts, is that?
I don't, are they actually putting them in?
I think you should have that conversation, but my understanding is that they are.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
And, you know, and it was the addition of the, as best I can tell, it was the addition of the pickleball that triggered, you know, literally millions of dollars worth of site work up at the existing tennis courts. So if the pickleball gets done, you know, by the senior center on a flat spot between the senior center and the hill itself, it sounds like, I mean, they're not even making a request. I don't know where the money's coming from, but I think it'd be really good to know that, because that may clear the path for the tennis courts to, you know, to go through at a much lower cost.
Absolutely. I wasn't aware that project was moving forward, but I will contact them tomorrow.
Okay. You should talk to Glenn as well, Glenn Pratt. It's where I got the insight.
Okay.
comment. The last I heard, there was several $1 million expected to be spent or needed to be spent for playgrounds, fields, and courts. That's the last I heard. And it raises the question of proceeding with our future financial planning. Given that there are several needs, including these playgrounds, fields, and courts, for several $1 million. I don't know if that's still the case, but it just triggers in my mind whether we on capital budget should take the initiative, request a meeting with our new finance director, and begin the process of assessing what our current, what our 5 and 10 year debt loads are or could be, and begin to nail down that variable, rather than wait for a committee that seems to be under the control of the select board right now. I would just assume let capital budget do what it's supposed to do and be looking out for the town's financial capital needs and initiate a conversation with the finance director. So that's a lot to put on the table in front of Susan and Brian. Randy,
No, it's not. So our finance director technically landed, 2 weeks ago and then was out sick. So that's why that hasn't happened yet. You're spot on. We should be, reaching out to the new finance director and having, some candid, discussions on these things with regards to, both the long term and the short term, Michael. So you're spot on. It's not, what you're saying is not too much at all. It's exactly in line with what we should be doing with a newly onboarded director of finance, who I think actually showed up in the office really this week for the first time. So she's just getting oriented and settled into, to going through our numbers to understand what's going on. So your comment's timely and it's spot on. With regards to the fields, I just, I don't, the number that I saw in the total study of fields and recreational spaces was something like $10 million.
yeah, 7 to 10.
Yeah, it's not just a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
And I Michelle, you're welcome to absorb this and pass it along to whoever, wants to factor this into their thinking. But at least I individually would wrestle with the idea of just plucking a project out of that list and dropping it into STM, because, people feel some sense of urgency to do something. $10 million worth of rec projects, needs to establish its position vis-a-vis all the other capital needs in town. And, right now the tennis courts are on the plan and the rest of the stuff isn't. So I guess if the item is the tennis courts, then, perhaps that's something that we've been prepared for. But I think a new $4 million turf field somewhere is a completely different game.
Yeah, so I don't think that's what's coming before you.
Okay.
If anything, you're going to see a small scale project. A project, when I say playgrounds may come before you, we've done some inspections of our playgrounds, and we're kind of checking off those safety needs before we go for the wants. So I think those are the smaller scale things that'll come before you, but they are over $10,000. So
got it. Okay, that's really helpful. You're helping me, manage my anxiety.
yeah. So no, we're not going to put before you a $10 million project.
With 2 weeks to go. I mean,
Yep. No, small scale projects. Like I said, safety first, wants or needs second.
All right. All right, anything else or should we wrap?
Let me just ask Michelle, is there anything new on the warrant articles? Anything that we should be concerned with? Anything from town hall?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, I don't know if you are aware, but they're having those citizens petition meetings, I believe next Wednesday evening at Wilcott Commons.
It's not
Um,
capital.
It's not capital, but I
No.
didn't know if it's something you would want to sit in on because it does affect
Oh, yeah.
roads and sidewalks, so
Yeah. Mhm.
it may be something you'd be interested in.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, Michelle, are there any items turning up on the warrant that, perhaps aren't being earmarked as capital that should be? I mean, is there anything that people are considering, funding out of ARPA and just, not coming to see us first? Or is that none of those appearances taking place?
Nothing that I can think. Well, there's one thing that may be funded out of ARPA, and it is a position. It's an employee, a contract position for a period of 1 year. It's a sustainability coordinator to help with all these federal grants to see if we can pull down some money while they're out there. And she would facilitate all of that.
Okay. So the idea is to spend some money to gather a whole lot.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. And at one point or another, I thought I saw that there might be a top-up request of some sort for the the AC system up at DPW. Is that not?
That's part of capital improvement projects. So I believe we're getting those. We should be getting those.
We are, but we were short funded by about $5,000, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
in the spring. I don't know if that money has been found. I don't know if they're coming back for it. I don't know if it's in a contingency line item that perhaps can be funded elsewhere. I would have to check on that.
Right. I'm looking at some notes I took at the last advisory meeting I went to, and it's that HVAC upgrade is part of the list of capital improvement projects. We've covered everything else on that list. Electric vehicles, police radios, vestibule is coming, generators done, the HVAC upgrades is to come, Beechwood water main, and then CPC, the amphitheater, lacrosse wall, and Beechwood playground improvements, TBD. And that's what I have.
Yep. So the Beechwood Playground is one of those safety needs we're talking about. We don't know exactly if we're coming before you for a plan. We don't have any equipment chosen yet. There's a group in Beechwood that's working on that. I don't know if this is going to be a special town meeting request or an annual town meeting request, to be honest.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think primarily the ask will be for CPC to fund it.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So it all correlates with what I'm hearing through advisory.
Yes.
Okay. And keep in mind the 5,000 shortfall in the AC system, to the extent that we have other appropriations where the pricing comes in slightly lower, they have the ability to shift. Just not sure we're experiencing that in the current environment. Okay, well, is anything further, or should we adjourn?
We should adjourn.
Okay, happy to entertain a motion. Would anyone so desire?
I move we adjourn.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Susan Franklin,
Hi.
Michael Dick,
Michael Dick, aye.
Brian Host, aye. The time is 8:34. We are adjourned. Have a great evening, everybody.